I'm the host, and today my guest is Jeremy Hickmans and Blake Duncan. Jeremy is the high performance manager of the Dolphins as well, and Blake Duncan is the head strength and power coach. Today's our key topic is strategies for athletic excellence and how to transfer onto on-field performance. So welcome, fellas. Thanks for jumping on. Really looking forward to our chat.
It's a pleasure, Jack. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
For, I guess, Jez, we might kick off with yourself, mate. For those that aren't aware of your work, do you mind providing a background on your passion for the industry and where you've worked over the years?
Yeah, no stress. It's been a fair little journey. I sort of started showing my age a little bit. Started back in the mid-90s, started playing, and then sort of coming to the rehab side in the UK, working. I remember first starting work back in Durham Uni when AEST was sort of first kicking off. And really getting that transfer from I was a tennis coach at the time, being a tennis coach coming more into the strength and conditioning and sports science side. And really enjoying that transfer and actually getting, that sort of long-term development with the athletes. And then when I came over here, early 2000s, had a couple of years at QAS. It was a bit of an eye-opener working with a variety of sports, with beach volleyball, developmental soccer, train the coaches, and then I was lucky enough to get the opportunity to go to the Broncos back in 2005. So essentially from there, I've been sitting in rugby league. I've been at the Broncos, down to St George, back up to Newcastle, back to the Broncos again. Unfortunately, managed to get sacked from the Broncos at the end of 2018 and had a few years out. So spend a bit of time in swimming, had a little taste of AFL with the Lions girls up here. Did a bit of work with the P&G Hunters, a little bit of netball for my sins, and then back to Canberra last year and back up to the Dolphins with the new franchise. So it's been good to get back into the footy environment. It's certainly a different environment, but it was a great little block away, just to get a bit of a refresher and have an experience of different athletes again.
Yeah, yeah, that's a huge range of both field and team sports. So that fit makes quite good fitting in terms of that transference effect, I guess, for those listening in that might not just be rugby and footballers, but anyone looking to transfer their performance, their stuff they're doing in the gym and on the field. And Blake, do you mind sort of providing as well for those that aren't aware of your work, I guess your passion for the industry and your work experience over the years?
Yeah, so mine's definitely not anywhere near as extensive as Jez's. I always grew up playing rugby league as a kid, and when I figured out that I wasn't going to be good enough to be able to make it at a pro level, which is probably about a 12 or 13, although I probably should have been about 9 or 10 years old. I always liked the training side of things, and so once I was going through school and started with PE at school and a little sports science sort of major at school into sport and exercise science at uni, and then went from there. With part of my uni prac hours, I got to do my internship at the Broncos, which is where I met Jeremy, and then, pardon me, then rolled into a couple of different roles from there. So I was at the Broncos for about 6 years in various roles, from assistant S&C into a bit of rehab. Same deal, did 6 months away from footy for a little while before I went down to Canberra with Jez last year, and then back up to Queensland with the Dolphins for this year. So all of my pro stuff's been with rugby league, so definitely comfortable in that space, given that that's been my background as a kid and where I was interested from a young age as well.
Oh, very good. Yeah, thanks, Blake. Appreciate it, mate. And I guess if we kick off the key topic, I think, Jez, you came up with it. What does sort of transference-centric approach mean to you, mate?
Yeah, it's a difficult one. We were talking about that one today, and it's very easy to throw it out. And I think as much as we talk a lot about the transference and how we can actually take what we do in the gym and take what we do in our training to performance, it's really about having a look at our program and integrating the different parts of our program together. I think it's very easy for us to be looking at strength, looking at conditioning, looking at speed in a very siloed manner. So I like to think one of the strengths of our programs is the ability for the athlete and the coaches to see how what we do in the gym actually relates directly to what we do on the field. So as much as we talk about that transference and how we can use our gym side, it really is probably a better way of putting it is that integration. Having said that, we really try and set our athletes up in a manner that they can actually to look at some problem solving. When we talk, it always sounds a little bit wanky if I can say that, but it's we talk about that journey of like guided discovery. We allow them to fail. We really challenge them in different ways to trying to get away from that sort of traditional approach of strength training or conditioning training, and really allow them to find the best ways to solve the problems. I always say one of the best things I've learned from working with Wayne Bennett for a long time, and it probably wouldn't surprise anyone, is when to shut up. As a coach, it's very easy to give those answers and to and try and talk all the time. But one of the key things is to just sit back, set up the environment, and let them find those ways to solve it. After all, they're the athletes. Mm-hmm. As much as I like to think we've got a bit of an idea of what we're talking about, we haven't always got all the answers. So, letting them find it, letting them work out how to transfer those skills that we give them into the actual performance arena is really key for us.
Yeah, adding on to that bit, I suppose for me as well is the like what Jez has said, is the importance of challenging the player and letting them find it out. So we obviously try and help them to be the best that they can be, but we work backwards from coming up with our problem or what we want to try and change, and then work backwards from there to be able to come up with different ways of attacking it. And so in our current setting in rugby league, obviously you still need to be strong. You still got to do some of your traditional movements to be able to get those qualities, but that doesn't mean that that's like just the pillar of our field or strength programs. And the ability to be able to use that strength in different movements and different planes to be able to transfer into activities for your sport is obviously a massive part of optimizing that performance. And so looking at how that can happen the best way between our integration is pretty important for us.
And that philosophy that you guys touched on in terms of the athletes really driving that learning process and almost working it out from themselves with your guidance, is when you're talking about transference, is that obviously there's some physical qualities that's happening there, but is it also the ability for them to go through that process and learn and find a way is also something that you think helps with on-field performance in terms of from a mindset point of view?
100%. I think, like anyone learning, if you find the way to do it and you understand why you're doing it, I think you're going to get better results in the end. There's periods where you can get frustrated when you want to jump in and tell them the answer, or you want to tell them to do it this way. But sometimes, like I say, you've got to shut up and let them fail. And by failing, actually learn the ways forward. Anyone who's got kids out there, it's probably a very similar way of looking at things. It is that discovery, and like I say, it tends to be more ingrained if you've actually felt the way and you felt the success of the way you've done it. As I say, you've got to go through a little bit of pain to get there in the end, and as long as it's safe, that's probably another thing we always have that debate about. Like a lot of the I think, in my opinion, a lot of the stuff we do in the gym is dictated by being quite structured, quite controlled, quite safe. So we're trying to take out of that environment and make it a little bit more of an open environment. Doesn't mean we throw 100-kilo barbells on our back and go jumping around the gym all the time, but we can really test them, as Blake said, through different planes of motion in different ways with different skill aspects within the gym environment. That's we like to think transfers into their learning and their ability to be coached.
You mentioned something about bringing the coaches on board in that journey as well. Like, what are some effective ways that you've found? Is it showing them some live sessions and getting the coaches on the gym floor? Or is it more just talking them through, perhaps over a beer or coffee, about your philosophy? Like, talk us through about that process and getting the coaches on board. And
it's an interesting one, that. And, I think a lot of people have that perception of Wayne and what he's like in the press conferences and that kind of thing. And I always say, working with Wayne Bennett, one of the best things he does is let you get on with your job. He trusts you to be the so-called expert in the job, but he'll also wander up behind you when you're doing something. And I won't use quite the language he uses, but it's what the hell are you doing there? And you've got to be able to justify that to him. And to his credit, he's someone who likes to be challenged as well. He's obviously seen along about 70 years worth of athletic development, I think Wayne's seen. And for someone like that to be challenged and open to new ideas is pretty cool. And having just we talked about doing there's other sports, having worked with other sports, I've been really lucky that the coaches have seen something that's a little bit more exciting, I suppose. Rather than just that traditional, and being really open to it. But the best coaches will question it, but the best coaches will be open to whether we've got an answer to it as well. And we want to be challenged. As I say, there's plenty of times he's wandered up behind me and said, "What are you doing?" And I haven't had an answer, and so it makes you think, "Well, am I doing the right thing as well?" And from my point of view, having the staff working there, I'll do the same thing. Whenever they write a program, it's what's that for? Where's that leading? So being able to challenge that and have some kind of philosophy or real content behind what you're doing is absolutely key again.
And what inspired, I guess, like you mentioned, the traditional approach, and obviously that's still part embedded in the program. But what inspired the, I guess, more of a unique approach or modern day approach, whatever we want to call it, where you focus on that transference and different planes of motion, and integrating that into the program? Was it due to some issues and searching for some answers around perhaps some injuries, or was it more performance and trying to look for areas to help the athletes reach better performance, feedback from athletes? Talk us through the thinking behind it all.
I think there's a couple of little factors in there, but from my standpoint, obviously having not been around anywhere near as long as Jez or been as experienced as Jez, it doesn't seem as much of a shift for me, like as if I used to do traditional training and then now train this way. Like it's probably comes from I've got a half a rehab background. So I worked for 3 years at the Broncos as the rehab S&C and did the same role down at Canberra as well. And such a big part of that rehab space is problem solving and trying to obviously figure out how to fix an issue or return a player back to the same level of performance that they were at prior to being injured. And so in that rehab space, you spend a lot of time together and you figure out sort of individual aspects that need work, and that's either in the gym or on the field. And like I said, I think a big part of that is sort of using a bit of creativity and trying to get to that same common goal without necessarily having to separate your gym and your strength sessions completely, and being able to have that tie over across the pair of it. I think that's had a really big bang for buck and improvement for being able to get those rehab players to a level that we need them to be able to get to in order to get back and perform properly again. So I think, being Jez had touched on it before as well, when I've worked with him before, I've been lucky enough that he trusts me to be able to do my job well. So it means I don't have to be afraid to try something a little bit different and can have a crack at something. So long as I can justify why I'm doing it or there's a clear goal or an outcome there, then we can have a crack at anything pretty much and see how it goes after that.
Right, I've taught him well,
Yeah, absolutely. You go, Jez.
Yeah, so I was going to say, we always used to have interesting conversations, particularly at the Broncos. I think we had a very good group of staff there that would challenge each other. And I think for probably 5 or 6 years before I moved out of the league, we had this conversation at the start of every preseason about why is the squat the base of our program? Why is the bench press? Can we get away from this? And really, I was always too scared to fully get away from it, because it's that real traditional, you've got to be able to squat, 2 times, 2.5 times your body weight. You've got to be able to deadlift this. You've got to be able to bench. And it was always sort of in my head about why, is that the be all and end all? But, as I say, it was fear almost that that's what we've been brought up with, fear of let's change something. And if you get it wrong, what are the consequences there? And so when I came out of league, and particularly going into swimming, obviously a hugely different end of the spectrum when it comes to the culture and the environment and what you need to get out of it. You don't need to build those, bigger muscles, and you don't want to, you don't need to. So I was very lucky going into the swim program with Dean Boxall, and people will know him from his celebrations at the Olympics. That he's a little bit of a lateral thinker as well. So when I went into his program with a few of the swimmers there, he was very much like, I want you to, I want you to challenge this. I want you to change it, because I'm coming from outside this way. I didn't have a clue about swimming really, so I had to just go in and actually ask those questions. But one of the things that really struck me is that that I was going into a swim program whose underlying movements were how much you can chin, how much you can squat, and I was like, well, is that really relevant to a very much a skill based or a energy system based sport like swimming? So we took that program and just ripped it apart, to be honest. And I always said at the start, I'm either going to either going to make you successful or ruin you. I'm not sure. We'll see which one it is. But those athletes, they really bought into it. They hated gym when I first went in there. And by the end of it, we were challenged and we were giving them so many different things to do that was outside the realm of just come in and lift weights. That they really bought into it. We talk a lot about athlete buy-in. They really saw the relevance of it to their sports. And the one thing I always say was very successful in that one. I remember Dean came to me as the coach, and he probably a year and a half into the program, and his comment was that he feels like his athletes are responding to his coaching better. So their ability to coordinate, their ability to respond to coaching cues was improved, and he put that down to a lot of the stuff we were doing in the gym. So that was a really real successful moment to me, where we hadn't lost any strength, or the basic strength testing. We started to use that strength better in the pool, and they started to move better in the pool. That's a very different sport from footy, but it was one of those things where I'm like, okay, well, there might be something to this. And so then coming back into footy, and I had to work with the AFL girls, and we did the same kind of thing. For those girls, had a bit more of a lifting background. We transferred it. Let's take it away and let's use this. And they had a successful year that year. I don't know if I can claim all that quite, to be honest, but I'd love to. And it was just like, sort of as a bit of a light bulb moment to me that, okay, well, we can do this. We need to keep our stream of strength in here, or traditional strength in here. But let's just do a few different things. Let's really change it. Let's challenge. Let's talk about transference a little bit more. And I'll touch wood every time I say it, but it seems to have been fairly successful in the way we can actually get our athletes to respond and develop.
What type of things have I guess come out of the program to add in more of this transfer type coordinative movement patterns, do you think, over the years?
I change every week as to what we should do better. I still haven't quite settled on the big thing. One of the keys for me is rotation. I think we talk a lot about squatting being basis of athletic movement, but I'm going around that squatting and rotation at the moment. I think so much of our athletic movement is based around controlling rotation or producing rotation, and whether that be coming from a squat type movement or from your hips, from your trunk, core, whatever we want to call it. That's something we do a lot of, and that ability to control your body in a rotational aspect in so many different ways is something that we actually do a lot of in the gym. And it's amazing how that starts to transfer into the ability to control your body in more randomized type movements, in skills on the field, in games as well. So that's something that we use a lot of now.
I guess like one of the aspects of traditional training where it's hard to change, and take out of the program, is because it's quite easy to measure, I guess, which is something that we love to do, with the weight that's lifted on the bar or the speed that the weight's moving. Where these coordinative, more complex movement patterns, it is quite hard to measure. And what is strength, I guess, for a swimmer compared to what is strength for a rugby athlete and an Australian rules footballer. But is a lot of it guided by coaches' input? So like you mentioned, I feel like they're picking up information better. Their skill has got better up in the pool, or they're kicking the ball better, they're passing the ball better. So that's one area that we can measure from, which is subjective but pretty important when it's the head coach, as well as the athletes, the experienced athletes giving you that feedback. Is that one area that you use to measure it, or are there some objective things that we can add to it as well?
I think it's the biggest flaw in everything we talk about here is that we can't measure it very well. And I go back to I don't know if it's a good argument or not on this one, but so much of what we do as strength and conditioning coaches is based around what we can measure. So we almost write our programs based on something we can quantify, rather than using our coach's eye quite as much. And as you say, getting feedback from athletes and feedback from coaches as to how they feel about it, how they feel that relates to their movement, and how they feel that affects their performance, is probably our best feedback mechanism at the moment, or quantification mechanism at the moment. But I'll very readily admit it's ridiculously hard to measure. I can't say you've gone from squatting 100 kilos to squatting 150 kilos, but we know self-reported results, I suppose, will get better. There's always a flaw to that, and that's one of the biggest parts. I can't go to the board after a years and say, "Oh, we've improved their strength by 20% because I can't measure it." So I've got no good answer to that one, I'm afraid, but I feel like it's a lot better.
From my end with that, so in our program this year, we still always had that traditional element with a back squat and a bench press and a bench. So for our rugby league athletes, that strength and that size is still an important factor to being able to get through that week-to-week grind of the NRL. So being able to have those basic elements of foundational strength, that they always stayed in our program throughout the whole year. So we always had that ability to be able to track how they were traveling traditionally in that linear and sort of that squat bench pull kind of movements. And it's the accessory work that happens around that where we address our coordination and rotation and speed of movement and all the other kind of aspects that we're trying to address. That's where that gets picked up. So the sort of like, I nearly contradict myself a little bit, but it was very consistent throughout the year, even though the accessory movements themselves might change quite a bit. The pattern of our program was still really, really consistent throughout the whole year.
Yep. Yeah, that makes sense. And for coaches listening in, strength and conditioning coaches, high performance staff, and they're in that process now where they're perhaps reflecting on what they could implement in the program for next year. They're in that off-season sort of mode. What are some of the key learnings, do you think, to be aware of when you're implementing this? Is it perhaps maybe some cognitive things, like if the athletes have come from a long meeting, it's early in the week, they're still fatigued from the game? Is some of this stuff quite challenging for the athletes to concentrate? Is it more to do later in the week, or does that not really matter? Talk us through, I guess, your thought process in how you plan and implement this type of training for, I guess, when it's new to the environment.
I think it's a progression into this training. We still can't ignore that traditional strength development from both a metabolic and a mechanical perspective as well. So we still do need to build connective tissue. We still need to build strength. We need to build joint strength and so on. But there should be a stream of this linked in all the way through. I think we've tried it both pretty quickly after a game, and we find there is and again, I can't quantify this, so this is a little bit anecdotally, but there's a real neural excitation, for want of a better phrase, that actually helps our athletes recover without that real like neuromuscular fatigue coming in as well. And the way we set up these programs is to make it short and sharp and pretty dynamic altogether. So getting that athlete buy-in, even when they're a little bit sore, because they're not lifting big weights, is actually pretty easy. So and you'll know it coming from AFL. A lot of the athletes 2 or 3 days after the game, you ask them to squat heavy, they're still in a significantly fatigued position. So you see a lot of the time, people will talk to us about strength dropping off through the season, and we haven't really found that. Strength doesn't really drop off because we can maintain it in different ways. And then we'll address probably in pre-season towards the end of the week. So even when they're a little bit fatigued, we find we get some really good results from them coming into like a speed and movement type session. And then in season, we just have that stream, weaves in through our traditional strength training all the way through the year. And as I say, like I think Blake made a couple of notes on here before the session about the intent and purpose that we get out of the athletes with it as well. And you can get that real grind. Oh, I've got to squat again. I've got to lift heavy again, as opposed to, we're going to move fast. We're going to really challenge you in balance. And if you get it wrong, you're going to half fall over. But that's okay. So it becomes a little bit of fun and a little bit of, entertainment for us all along the way. And it can create that really good environment within the weight room as well, that, you can either take it one way, you can take it as a fail, or you can take it as a challenge. And, allowing them to fail and say, right, screw you, I'm going to do this now, is actually, creates that real good approach to training as well.
Yeah, I think with being able to spend time developing it throughout the preseason, we actually got one whole session each week this year where we got to just dedicate it to those sort of coordinative type movements. And that gave us a real ability to be able to sort of, from my standpoint, justify why we're doing it and why it had a place in our program. And we could communicate that with the players before each session. So these are the movements that we're doing. When we're doing that, we need to have that intent. We need to have that purpose with our movement. If you're not really ready to attack them, then it's a bit of a waste of time. Like, we're not necessarily maximizing what we're doing a lot of them for. And our guys, we had a great group this year that were really willing to sort of attack everything and have a really good crack at anything that we threw at them. And so because we got those good quality sessions in during the preseason, we were able to keep some of those movements in throughout our regular season program. That it was just part of what we do, really.
I think so. Like one of the things with this whole transfer-centric, whatever we want to call it, is that it never comes out. So we don't differentiate between traditional and transfer. It's all part of one program, and it's all part of that continuum and streaming system that we bring in through this season. We might prioritize something a little bit more or over another within sessions or within parts of the season, but there's always a stream in there. It's like keeping a hamstring strength stream in there all the time. We all know if we do Nordics and then don't do them for 4 weeks, they're going to get sore. So if we take anything out completely, we're going to potentially lose some of those skills. So it's always weaved into our program, within the individualization within our program. Now, some of our older athletes will do a lot more of this kind of work, because they do have a long training history. They're pretty strong, but they also don't necessarily respond to heavy strength work in the same way some of our younger athletes do. So to challenge these guys and get the best out of them in the gym, there's lots of different ways to do it.
Yes, that's interesting. Yes, I actually had the opposite effect where it almost primed them from a neural point of view, where it prepared them to run fast for the field session. So this is stuff that they're doing before training. They can do it early in the week to help prepare them for the upcoming main session. So there's really no area where you can't sort of put it into your week. Is it something that you can do quite frequently as well over off season, over your 3 main training sessions pre-season? Do a bit of it each day. And is there themes that you guys had in terms of areas you focused on?
Yeah, we certainly did. As Blake said, we had one session towards the end of the week that was absolutely working on around our movement. We still had a little bit of like Olympic lifting in there as well, so which sort of links in quite nicely with that speed of movement. But then we had, our earlier week might have been a bit more of a grind where we do need to get that traditional strength, but there's also within that there's going to be some aspect of transferring that strength into a movement or into a more challenging type movement. It's definitely, if we get it right, because we do make it hard, it's still hard work. They might not lift more than 15, 20 kilos in a session, but it's bloody hard work moving that fast and in different planes, as anyone who's tried it knows. So we've got to be a bit careful at the start of the year. If people aren't used to it, you can get pretty sore from it. Particularly around sort of your calf work. If you're looking at contact speeds off the ground, with a little bit of weight, you can get pretty sore. And we certainly find, a couple of athletes like you see them the next day, and I didn't lift anything, but I'm feeling that. And there is also that if you go hard at them like we do in preseason, there is also that that real neuromuscular fatigue that comes in. So I said we use it in season as like a neural excitation and neural priming, but that's a lot less demanding and a lot less fatiguing. Whereas in preseason, I say we whack them pretty hard with it. So. Footy players and vast majority of athletes need to feel like they're working hard. So one of the challenges to this is trying to get rugby league players are like. If you're not sticking 150 kilos on their back, they feel like they're going half-assed. So asking them to do an exercise with a 10-kilo plate, they sort of look at you initially and like, are you serious? But once they've done it, okay, that's pretty hard. And trying to get them across the line and realizing, they realize that this is hard work and they're going to benefit from
it. With that benefit as well, there's so many of the movements that you can either double up what you're doing in some of your field sessions or progress or regress from what you're doing there as well. So in our speed and agility sessions, there'll be movements and positions that the players get into on the field, and we can address them again in the gym through some of our exercises and movements. So then they get to see that direct transfer and that tie over between our strength and our field sessions. And I suppose when they see the relevance of that and how it can, then they can feel it both in the gym in a bit more closed setting, and then also feel it when they're out on the field and they're responding to a defender or attack, whatever it might be. It's just that constant reinforcement of the same sort of positions that we're trying to put them in. And like I said, when they can feel that happening on the field, and then they can either come back and slow it down and bring it into the gym, or the other way around, they felt us do it in the gym and then they get a chance to be able to do it on the field in that open setting. It really helps to keep going with that player buy-in that you mentioned before as well.
Oh, very good. And the, I guess, flow of the session, like if for someone to be a fly on the wall at a Dolphins sort of weight session, how does it sort of look? Have you got your backs and forwards in one, and then like have you broken up into a third of the squad coming through? And what is the sort of coach to athlete ratio? What's the sort of sweet spot when doing these more coordinative based training, where it sounds like you're giving them, there's a fair bit of individual aspects to it?
In pre-season, typically we'll lift in a forwards and a backs group. There might be another rehab group as well, and then can also be like a younger group or an older group. So typically we'll have at least 3 groups, which means we might have somewhere between 12 or 18 players for a lot of the time, or then you can sometimes blow them out to about 20 odd players as well, which is obviously a big challenge. Our facility is not a massive one, so that means we've definitely got to be well planned when we're putting our session together to be able to accommodate all those players and to make sure there's not too much of a backlog in any of those movements. But yeah, so generally, in pre-season it'll be a forwards and a back split with a rehab group as well. And then in season, we sort of alternate depending on turnarounds, because we've got different reserve grade affiliate teams that might play on a different day to our NRL team. That can depend on when they'll train during the week as well. So we might keep a forward and a backs group if we have the same turnaround, or that might go to an NRL group and a Queensland Cup group. So same deal, those kind of numbers, 15, 16, 18, depended on sort of any kind of factor with those sort of injuries or knocks, or just where they're sitting in the week with their turnarounds as well.
And normally we have 3 coaches in there as well. So you know, we like I said, we want to be shutting up and not over coaching, but we also want to be challenging them and making sure that intent and purpose and intensity of work is really in there as well. So we try and keep it down to that sort of 1-6, 1-7 ratio. And it works quite nicely, and it sets up the ability to rest in there as well, because you do need that. So we haven't got them on clocks or anything like that, just because we find the players don't respond too well to that. So we're almost setting up the program to enforce the rest by just waiting. And part of it is that that visual learning as well. There's no harm in seeing someone else do it and think, oh shit, I want to do it like that, and your mate giving you feedback on it. So we try and get them working in groups as much as possible, who are going to look again. We come back to, they're going to challenge each other in the best way. And I say you've been in enough footy gyms to understand how they challenge each other, so it's usually fairly entertaining as well.
Absolutely. And they, I guess from that neuromuscular point of view, to maximise their development, you mentioned that we don't want that sort of like perfect reps. We want them failing, we want them learning. If you had to put a number on it, is it like 60% good reps, 40% where there's a bit of feedback there that they got it wrong? Is that means the drill selection was about right? Or is it, you want to see, a high percentage? What if you had to put a number on it from a general philosophy, I guess, point of view with this type of stuff?
I think it really progresses.
Yeah.
I think initially you might see like a 20% perfect, but that's okay. And probably when you get to that sort of 80% perfect, you need to progress it.
You're ready to go.
And I go back to my swimming when I first went into swimming, and say, can I name drop here? Is that all right?
Yeah, of course. There's the people mentioned as part of the show notes, actually.
We always feel a bit awkward throwing that out, but so I'll use Ariane Titmus as prime example. So people know her well. She's and I hope she won't mind me saying it. She's an absolute Gumby out of the pool. Like she you ask her to throw a ball and it's embarrassing.
It's quite common for swimmers, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. But one of the things we did with her is like we did a load of rotational med ball throws. Totally non-specific to the pool, and I remember doing the first session with her, and she's like looking at me and just shaking her head and going, "What are you making me do?" And and it's something she really bought into in the end. But her ability to do that initially was piss poor, for want of a better phrase, but we just had to stick with it. And so once you get to that next stage, all right, we're going to do that with a bit more rotation. We're going to put a bit more weight in there. We're going to try express that with a bit more speed. So like she was horrible to start off with, and that trying to change her perception in that, okay, that's okay being horrible. But over a period of a couple of weeks, she became very good at it. All right, then, well, let's take it on to the next level. Let's introduce something else. So I'm always very happy, as long as it's not, they're not unsafe, I'm always very happy for them to fail fairly significantly initially, because as I said before, an athlete's personality tends to be, if I fail, I'm going to come back and do that again and show you. You got two options: you either don't do it, or you give them the finger and get on with it. And so part of our coaching process within these programs is to tell them they're useless to start off with, and then build them up after that. That's why. So yeah, but we want to put them in a position where they're getting challenged. I've said it a lot of the time. So letting them, if I put them in a position where they're challenged and they can do it straight away, well, I'm not really challenging them. Yeah. So I want them to fail initially and then come back and prove me wrong.
The structure of our programs as well, to tie in with how, or in season especially, tie in with how the coach structures his training is in 4-week blocks. So I find that's actually a really nice period of time to be able to sort of progress through those sort of success fail reps. Obviously, you start off, when you introduce something in that first week, there's going to be a hard week from a coaching perspective, because you're showing them a new movement or a progression from another movement. But then that as you progress through that 3 or 4 week program, that you'd expect them to be able to get a lot more quality in their movement and speed, or whatever, however you choose to progress that along. That should look heaps better by the end of that 4-week block than what it has when you've introed it in that first week.
Very good. And I guess that transference, going back to that, how do you work out what you need to work on from what the coaches want, how they want them to play from a technical point of view? Like what does that sort of performance look like? Is it improving their first 3 steps is a key pillar that you're focusing on with this type of stuff? Is it more their upright running postures, like change of direction? What are sort of the key areas that you're ultimately wanting to see this stuff, I guess, complement or supplement?
Yeah, I think you pretty much just summed it up there. There's probably our biggest areas, in a rugby league context, the key points of the game, you've got to have that underlying ability to stay in the game. But the key points of the game are making up those 2 or 3 meters. So your first 3 steps, whether that be off a straight line or a multi-directional position, and the ability to change direction and go. That's what's going to make or break, or make a tackle or break a tackle, I suppose, or make a break or not. It's a foot here and there that actually makes a difference. So a big part of what we talk about is being able to hit the ground, express that force, and move quickly.
And as you mentioned just before there as well, like that can literally be how we set it up in a stream. So we might have a superset that can be addressing max velocity running positions. So like a triple extension, upright torso, whatever that might be. But then we also might have a different superset within the same session that's looking at a more of a change of direction position. So they're all things that obviously bigger, faster, stronger, generally speaking, you're going to be a bit more successful. So if we can try and address as many of them as regularly as possible, then hopefully we're giving them a better chance of being a better athlete, and hopefully that transfers into more wins.
Absolutely. And the rotational aspect, what is that looking to help? Is that help the athletes get into those optimal shapes to produce that force, or is it like specifically allowing them to get into better trunk positions to maybe catch the ball? Or why is the rotational aspect?
We'll look at those. Yeah, absolutely look at both those. I think we've got a couple of athletes who struggle to pass. I'm going to put it in a nice way, but they're maybe they're left to right pass, and there might be some physical restrictions in there. So we'll set up the exercise to address that from a different way, and that we would from getting into the optimal shapes to produce power. But I think as you said, to start getting into those optimal shapes to produce power is probably the underlying side. And as you say, like very rarely our optimal shape is a squat type position. So that ability, if as soon as the ball's gone past me, for me to turn, to open the hips, to take the foot across the body and accelerate in a different direction. You've got to have those underlying muscular abilities to actually produce power, but then you've got to be able to produce it in those planes and in that way. So we'll try and again have that continuum from producing strength, transfer it, express it a little bit more, and it's how you can see that being related and being integrated is absolutely underlying key.
And for the athletes listening in, what are some of the key areas to focus on, do you think, in the off season? Well, maybe they don't have access to a coach. Like, are there some resources or things that they can find online, do you think, to reference this type of training? And if not, what would be some recommendations that you guys would make, I guess, more broadly speaking, to improve their athleticism?
Yeah.
So I think, like we sort of mentioned before, it's actually quite difficult if you don't have someone there to be able to guide you. So that is a pretty big barrier in this, like for an athlete looking to do it themselves. But such a big part of that is, I suppose, just the mindset or an attitude to be able to go in with an intent to be able to move and to really. I said it before with our guys, like I address it as attack the session. And that, like I said, that intent to be able to move well and to prioritize that quality of movement. So that could be through speed. It can also be when you've loaded a movement as well. But that real intent to be able to do something fast or do something well, rather than just going through the motions and doing it as a tick box. I think you get so much more from it, obviously, when you attack it from that kind of attitude and mindset.
Yeah, I think from a resource point of view, I mean, there's so much of the Franz Bosch's work out there, and like it's fantastic work. But I hesitate to use that as a be all and end all because it's pretty complex about the application and the use of that it's some damn good stuff. But it's complex to understand why you're doing it. But I think a lot of his work actually relates very nicely to what we talk about all together. So to look at that and get some examples based on some of the stuff he's put out is really key. But there's some tough work in there, as well. So that's good. We've obviously got our own website. I've got to throw that one out at some point. Haven't we? Pro training programs. Yeah, and that was and that sort of started from a point of view that actually looking for athletic development programs is quite hard. And I'm trying not to be too cynical about this, but there's a lot of personal training programs out there. There's a lot of 1,000 rep challenges out there, and a lot of ways of actually finding training tips on Instagram and on Twitter. The old bugger in me is coming out about social media now, I'm afraid, but it's we sort of looked at that and said there's actually not that many really well established training programs out there. So it's something we wanted to try and fill a little bit of a niche in there. Pretty hard to put programs out when you as Blake said, when you sort of need that sort of feedback and coaching. But I think for athletes, particularly young athletes out there, challenging themselves in a really coordinated manner with a little bit of speed and not worrying as much about lifting big weights, I think is really key.
Absolutely. And what was it just cut out a little bit there? Was it protraining.com, was it? Or have I got that wrong?
Protrainingprograms.com.
Programs, yeah. We'll add the link in the show notes.
You'll see. We're getting persuaded to do a little bit of social media, so there might be some very dodgy exercise videos of me and Blake doing them popping up in the future. But
I love it. We'll have to tag me. Yeah, very good. Awesome. Well, that wraps it up nicely in terms of the topic. Is there anything that we haven't touched on? Obviously, we've gone into some pretty good detail on this topic of transference, but is there anything you guys want to shed on before there's just the last couple of personal questions?
No, I think we've gone through a lot of it. I think the biggest thing for me is don't just always think about external load. We've got to think about changing your instability, your speed of movement, your different planes of movement. Let's try and get away from thinking I've got to put more weight on all the time.
Yeah, I suppose for me, from an S&C coach perspective, is don't be afraid to try it as well. And there's no reason why, if you're having a thought process, that you can't jump in the gym and play around with something that might look a little bit different or a little bit stupid, and use that as a way to figure out whether it might be a good idea to try it or not try it. And there's no rule book on how to train someone or how to coach someone. So don't be afraid to put your own spin on it and have a try at something that might be a bit different if you think it's going to get the result that you want there.
Yeah, great advice, guys. Love that. We get so caught in just thinking external load from powerlifting and bodybuilding, and there's plenty of other ways to train. And I think it's great advice for athletes, but also for the coaches as well. In both your work lives, do you have pet peeves? Anything in the industry that fires you up, makes you angry?
No, we're perfectly calm about everything. We were talking about that one today. We came up with this long list.
How long have you got? Yeah.
No, I think it's funny. We both talked to Blake. Blake touched on it right at the start. Both of us were, I don't know, failed athletes is quite it. You know, we both came at our own athletic careers in a way that we were probably poorly talented but worked hard. You know, and I think that brings that aspect of, you know, if I see an athlete who's got all the talent in the world who can't be bothered to work hard, that's definitely a pet peeve. And, you know, and we, you know, we obviously try and work with them, but, you know, I struggle sometimes when I see that lack of intensity in what they do at times, you know. And he said, we've all seen those athletes who have got all the talent in the world, but haven't necessarily got the attitude. And that frustrates me. So, sometimes I have to hand them over and just walk away, as you can imagine.
I'm the same there. I was a really, really good trier, but that meant that I had to sacrifice a little bit of talent. So to the same tune, you see someone who's not willing to put in the work or is not 100% committed when they do have the talent. I always just think of how good they could be if they had ticked both boxes there and what they could be. So, yeah.
I think Blake's been really nice there. He's got pet peeves of people not putting the plates away, not putting the dumbbells the right way around. That little bit of ADHD sitting next to him.
Yeah, that one's definitely been mentioned a few times on the show.
Yeah,
very popular answer. What about favourite way to spend a day off?
Yeah, well, we don't get a day off in professional sport, you know that. So,
24/7.
I think you know, like it's great. Again, one of the things we're working with Wayne, he's very, very much, you've done your work, get away from here. So he encourages us to have the day off, and not one of us gets to where we are without a work ethic. So, you know, a big part of our culture within our staff is to get away and get a day off. You know, we all went for a game of golf yesterday, and it was very, very embarrassing, but so it was great to get away and do that. And after that, really, you know, we've got a young family, so getting away, spending some time with the family, I get to support my daughter's tumbling career at the moment, so that's great to watch. And she's already doing strength programs, so she's got no chance at all. But getting away and actually spending some time with the family and getting away from footy is so important, because, you know, we all put a lot into it, and you need to get away and just not have to talk footy sometimes.
Much the same as Jezza. I've got a young family as well, so I love being able to spend a bit of downtime with those guys when I'm not at work, and if we can get over to the beach or try and convince them to come fishing with me or something like that, that's always a win for me. But yeah, I like getting up to not too much in my downtime, actually.
Yeah.
A little sleep every now and again.
Recharge the batteries, for sure. And we're recording of this of early September 2023. What's on the horizon for you guys? What are you excited about for the rest of the year?
Yeah, look, I reckon, like, I'm off with the PNG Cummels for a tour. That's going to be a little bit different. I get 4 weeks in Port Moresby at the end of this year, so that's going to be a bit of an experience. So I'm excited to do that one in a sick way, I think. But that's going to be, you know, a pretty good experience. But you know, leading into next year, like, it's obviously first year in the new franchise. It's been a pretty challenging an up and down year for us. You know, there's a lot of things we've had to put into place. We've had to bring a lot of people together, and it's always been that sort of constant battle through this year to address things that we need to get sorted. So a little bit of sort of period of stability and building on that first year next year is going to be pretty exciting. We've got some good players, some good recruits coming in, and just be really good to see if we can take it to the next level as a team. Sorry, when we take it to the next level as a team, not if, I should say. Yeah.
And yourself, Blake?
Yeah, much the same for me as well. Obviously, that's a massive deal for us, having this first year this year and being able to build what we want to build, but then obviously be able to progress from that as well. And it's something that is exciting, with a little bit of changeover in squad, but then also everyone who's come together as a staff as well, being able to from spending a bit more time together, so being able to figure out the ins and outs of how that all ties in and it integrates as a program. That'll be pretty exciting for us. But a bit closer to that, looking forward to. I've got a little holiday coming up shortly, so selfishly looking forward to that.
For sure. Oh, well, thank you so much, guys. From on behalf of everyone that's listened in, I've taken away some massive gems from that one. I think that integrated approach, like you said at the start, or that transference that we like to call it, is so important in high performance sport, and it's probably something that we're all striving to do at every club. But the challenge is being able to do it, and like you said, having that approach where you're focusing on it and letting the athletes really drive it and learn the process themselves. So there's some great takeaways. So really appreciate you jumping on the show and sharing with us both some stories, but also some practical things that we can take away and apply to our coaching, and for athletes that tuned in as well, something they can start from that intent point of view, hopefully focusing on that drive that they're doing and making sure they're really learning as well as during the process, as well as training. So appreciate you coming on, appreciate the time during your off season. For those that have any follow-up questions for either of you, where's the best place to get in contact? We've got the website there, protrainingprograms.com, which I'll add in the links, and some Instagram videos or tag of you guys doing this coordination-based training. But where's the best place if there's any DMs from coaches to hit you up?
Yeah, probably best just hit us straight up through our Instagram accounts, I would think. Mate, you got me on this one. It's a shocker. I got no idea when it comes down to that. But also, you can flick us an email if you've got any questions. Flick us an email to our Dolphins account. So just jeremy.hickmans@dolphinsnrl.com.au.
Yep.
Always really willing to to share the gems, I suppose.
And then mine's blake.duncan@dolphins.nrl.com.au as well. And then I get on LinkedIn a little bit as well. So you can flick me a message on there if the email is no good for you.
Perfect. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, we'll add those email addresses and Blake's LinkedIn in the show notes. So for those driving, listening to the recording, you can click those once you park the car. And thank you for everyone that's tuned in live. Our next live chat show is next Thursday with Andrew Lulham at 3 p.m. Australian Standard Times. That's 14th of September. So I'll see you guys all then. Thanks again, Blake.